Hey everybody, we are back with The Leap this week. Super excited to get started here. We're gonna get going in just a minute, so thanks to everybody who's joining us. We're gonna get our guest up on stage and get this thing going. All right, thanks for folks who are coming in. We're gonna get going in just a second here, get our guest up on stage, and super excited about the conversation today. We're talking about niching down, super specific. And I'm a big fan of our guest's Twitter and the content there. So. Okay, pray for us, everyone. Yes, we did it. Wow, crushing it already. Hey.
Amazing. I'm so excited. How's the audio? Is that okay?
Yeah, you sound great. Really
Okay.
appreciate you taking the time. I think everybody's gonna find all this content super helpful, honestly, just like the whole community. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm super excited.
So I'm gonna just do a quick little intro and then we're just gonna get right into it. So hey everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm Rachel Renock. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wethos, which is a software company that helps freelancers start and scale their studios. So we use data to basically guide you on successfully pricing, executing, and also building your projects. Um, every week, or no, sorry, every month, I interview a different creative entrepreneur about their journey taking the leap into freelance, starting their business. This week, we're talking to Grace Walker, which really excited to get into. Grace is an independent website designer and Webflow developer and expert specifically. I actually, encountered her content on Twitter for the first time like a couple of months ago and been following along ever since. And I've just found the idea of, I think what I've seen is that people tend to go freelance and they kind of go one of two directions completely differently. They either go really wide or they go really niche. And so I'm always really interested to talk to somebody who is not just niche in like skill set, but like specific to a platform or technology, which is really, really interesting. So Grace, would love for you to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about, the kinds of projects that you do and the kinds of clients that you service, and then a little bit more about your journey to freelance.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, thanks so much for inviting me here. I was so excited, and what a wonderful introduction. Like you said, my name is Grace. I'm a freelance designer and Webflow developer. I specialize in designing and building custom marketing sites. I'm really focused on building marketing sites that are beautiful and functional, and I work with clients across industries. So I don't really have an industry niche, but I definitely have a skill set niche, which took me quite a while to kind of figure out that, oh, that's like another way that you could niche down. I'll be celebrating 3 years of freelancing this July. So it's been quite the journey, a lot of ups and downs
Three
over
years,
those years.
that's big. That's a
Yeah,
big milestone.
but I feel like 3 years is like, okay, I'm doing it. Like this is we're in it for sure.
That's amazing. So it's been 3 years. Um, how have things changed for you since like you started versus like where you're at today? And how has niching down sort of come into play there? Like, did you explicitly think like Webflow, this is my thing, like let's go for it, or did it kind of just naturally happen that way?
Yeah, so I like I said, I've been freelance for 3 years. Before that, I was working in a studio for 3 years, like a small branding and communication studio. I got to touch everything. It was essentially like a team of 3 to 5, 3 to 6 while I was there, all women. Like it was amazing. I loved it so
Cool.
much. But I got to touch everything there. And so really did a lot of Webflow development while I was at that studio. I was introduced to Webflow while I was in university, and I was kind of like, oh, this is like maybe a way for me to build websites without having to code, which like up until that point was my biggest blocker. And I was like, I'm bad at this. And like, this is not going to go well. So when I found Webflow, it was kind of like, oh, this is amazing. I can build websites. My clients really love them, or the clients at the studio. And then kind of over 3 years of working at the studio, doing like a pretty big volume of work of web design and development. I saw a lot of other folks who were freelancing with Webflow, and I was like, oh, they're getting a lot of traction and they're making a lot of money, and like maybe this is something that I can do. And that was kind of like the impetus for me saying like, okay, like maybe I should give this a shot on my own and see how that goes.
And how did you, I guess, like, how does this impact the way that you think about like sourcing work or new clients. And yeah, like does it, because in a way, again, you can sort of look at it either way, right? Like on one side of the spectrum, it's like, oh, it may narrow the pool pretty significantly of who potentially is a client. But then again, the people who need you like really need you, and that also is great for like, growing the business. So yeah, like how do you manage that, and how does it impact things if at all?
Yeah, I think when I first like started doing Webflow work, I didn't really even realize that like that was a specific enough niche. I think when I first started freelancing, like all the advice was niche down. You have to find an industry
Mm,
niche that you want to work with. And I was like, well, I don't know, because like I haven't done enough work to know like who I want to work with. And I was just doing Webflow work because I was really good at it and I had some traction and I was like, okay, this is good. And in a sense, like that kind of niche came about very naturally for
mm,
me just because it was like the bulk of the work that I was doing. And then over time I realized like, oh, this is like specific enough that I don't really need to niche down into like a certain industry of Webflow
mm,
sites. So on the plus side, being very specific in that niche of having um, like only doing Webflow work, I do web design and I build in Webflow, and like that is what I do. I've like more specifically tried, or not tried, but like recently that has got even narrower of I like to, or I want to be building marketing websites,
mm.
particularly after a brand project has happened with the
Okay.
company. So whether that's like a net new brand or working after a brand refresh. I don't do brand work anymore, but I partner with some like amazing brand designers. So following their work has become like even more of a niche. And in a good way, I think having that very specific niche um, often means that my clients have done research before they've reached out to me. So they've qualified
Interesting.
Webflow as a platform. So they're like actively looking into what's the best option for my site. So they're often well researched, well informed. They know platform limitations, things like that. But on the downside of like having that specific niche is sometimes that I get labeled as only a Webflow developer, and I
Mm.
have this kind of like pretty substantial design background. I have a degree in graphic design. I worked in a studio. I've been working as a professional for 6 years. It's still kind of like a baby in terms of my full career, but I think that's probably the only downside is being kind of put into this hole of like, oh, she only does Webflow development. And like, I
Interesting.
do so much more than that.
Yeah, it's totally double-edged sword, but honestly, the benefits sound like they outweigh.
Yeah, like pretty
Like,
good.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that sounds like it's going quite well. I think though, what's really nice about it too is that so much of the sales process comes down to like educating clients a lot of the time. And so if you have people showing up, like I already Googled a bunch of this stuff, and we can kind of leap over that part where like you have to do like a whole assessment or like a, which CMS should we go with? And like sometimes they're really coming in like have done nothing at all. And
Yeah.
that can be a slog from just like a getting through the proposal process, and then even just like throughout the project. So I think like there must be more speed there too, I imagine. Like, do you think that you're able to execute, or I don't know, work with clients who are able to move faster in that way?
Yeah, I think it's more efficient on a few fronts. And I think, like, at my core, I love efficiency. Like, I want everything to be as smooth and fast as possible. Like, that's just like what makes my heart sing. And working in that very specific niche, it makes it more efficient at the outset to qualify whether a client is going to be a good fit for me or not. Makes it more efficient to send a proposal, because at this point in time, I really have two proposal structures.
Mm,
I have design and development projects and development only projects. And there's a little bit of like variation that happens in terms of like number of pages, the scope, the scale of the site, additional functionality. But like really, it's kind of two options. So speed of proposals has greatly increased. And then obviously working with clients, I have built over 90 websites in Webflow. I know
wow.
where its limitations are. I know where we need to supplement with third-party tools. And so having just that volume of experience, I'm able to very quickly flag things that are going to cause issues for us. I know what trips clients up during the whole process, all of it. So it's really like added a lot of efficiency across like a multiple different fronts.
Yeah, and predictability, I imagine too, in terms of like your own pricing and less variability, I imagine, because like, if you're doing a bunch of different projects across a bunch of different things, the profitability by project even it can vary so greatly that like repeat nature of it. Does that make
Yeah.
that tracking more predictable as well, like from a money standpoint?
I think it makes traffic management, like project management and my capacity management, a lot easier because I
Mm,
know how much capacity I have and kind of have a gut feeling of how many projects is the right amount of projects for my capacity.
hmm
So I have a really good sense of the time it takes to do those projects, the timeline that they're going to follow. Usually it's between like 8 to 12 weeks for like a standard 8 to 10 page marketing website. So I have a really good sense of like how long things are going to take, how they slot together in my calendar. And obviously, like from a pricing structure, I have kind of ranges now of like design and development work starts here, development only work starts here. And that's made it a little bit easier as well, quoting new projects, working with new folks, and all of
and to
that.
kind of vet people like up front. I have like a general rule of thumb with money where I'm like, get to know as soon as possible. Like if it's gonna be a no, I want to know now, not 2 weeks from now after we've done all this work and had all these conversations. And now, we're just starting to talk about budget. I mean, like in no other industry, in nothing else that you buy in the world does it work like that. Like you don't like go through like weeks and weeks of figuring out what car you want just to like get to that and be like, oh, actually this thing is like 500 grand and way out of your budget. Like it's, you know what I mean? It can be a frustrating process on both sides, I think, when things get slowed down or bogged down by a lot of that stuff. But pricing is so challenging
Yeah,
because the scope is super important.
definitely. And I think it makes it a lot easier to, because I have like such narrow offerings that like there's two ways of working with me, that it makes it really easy for me to qualify someone if I want to do the work or not. So I'm trying to qualify work on a few different fronts. One is budget, like does it align with the goals that I have and my time and materials costs? But also, is it value aligned? Am I excited by what this client is doing? Do I want to help their business? And then chemistry with the client kind of really plays in as well,
Mm.
of like, how do I get along with this person? Are they decisive? Do they seem like they're going to be a good partner, have open communication? And kind of all of those things together. A lot of the way that I decide on projects now is really like a gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But it is kind of like based in those kind of three categories of like chemistry, being value aligned, budget, and obviously timing as well. Because sometimes like timing just doesn't work out. Like everything else could be perfect, but I'm booking work for 3 months from now and a client needs something right away and it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with that, with that kind of, with that level of like predictability and also just like vetting in general, you just can really, I don't know, start to be really specific about the types of things that you want to spend your time on. And, I hear this a ton, which is super common. Like people really care about the values alignment. It's like basically this like triangle of like budget, values alignment, and then communication is totally a huge thing. But it can be, I don't know, it can be challenging. Budget to me is like the easiest thing to vet for,
Yeah.
but I think those other two things are definitely, they feel like gut reactions. I actually read recently that when you feel like you're making decisions based on your gut, what you're actually doing is just pattern recognition
Yeah.
and like seeing patterns basically from the past and recognizing those things. And that's what gives you that like gut feeling of like, oh, or like, I don't know about this. So like, unfortunately for all of us, we just have to keep fucking up. And then we finally start to, you know, listen to our gut because it's usually recognizing some kind of pattern from the past.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that pattern recognition, like I definitely feel that, like that. A lot of the times, the chemistry question with a client, like, do I want to work with this person? I'm comparing them and vetting them against past clients that I've had, and I've worked with so many wonderful clients that I get to see like different traits in people and how different people work, and I can recognize like when someone shares traits with like a client that I've had in the past that's been really great, or if they share traits with somebody who like I maybe didn't work with so well. And so being able to like recognize both of those, like honestly just came with the volume of work that I've done. But it's been really helpful.
The only way
Yeah,
out is through, you know? That's one thing
definitely.
I definitely know to be true. I wonder, like, with, I guess, well, are there any questions that you ask during that process that help you understand where they are on that, alignment, both for values and, yeah, I guess like their end goals?
Yeah, something that I really look for in clients is folks who are really goal driven, who have a very clear idea of what success looks like for them. So oftentimes I'm asking, like, what does this website need to do for your business? Like, in an ideal state in the future, how would this website make your business better? And so I'm getting like more specific answers about what this website needs to functionally do, how it needs to perform, um, because I find that clients who've given some thought to the actual reason behind like why they're doing this and like why they're going to invest all this money, are often very they often plan really well. They're forward thinkers. They want to have clear goals. They're measuring things for the end result, and I find that those clients are often like very well prepared. Another like absolutely green flag for me is when a client asks how they can be well prepared for a project,
Mm.
like what they can do to have successful project with me. And I feel like that is like the number one green flag for me. If someone is considering how they can be a great client, I think that that shows a lot of effort and respect on their end for wanting to have a project that's really successful. And so that to me is like someone asked me that today, and I was like, yes, I love
Yeah,
it.
that's a keeper, I would say. I think, like, especially because if you're with clients that are more like outcomes based, you can continue to go back to that throughout the course of the project. Like when things are maybe not going great, or like some surprise came up, or like there's a scope increase, or whatever it might be. Like you can keep kind of realigning them on that shared like outcome, and it helps, I think, smooth out some of the, inevitable bumps that are sometimes along the way, depending on the project and pretty much at any given time.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
how does so websites, they sound to me, and probably a lot of people maybe, that they're one-off projects. Is that
Yeah.
true? And if not, what does an ongoing like relationship look like for you with a client?
Yeah. Yeah. So our website's one-off projects. Yes and no. I would say probably like 80% of the websites that I build them. My kind of like baseline philosophy with building websites is that I want to empower clients to manage their own sites long term.
Mm.
So like updating blog posts, adding new team members, like managing their CMS items, I really want clients to handle that themselves. And so I go through a training session with every website I build to make sure that clients know how to edit and update content, manage their CMS, what they can't do within that structure. And with that as well, oftentimes, like most folks can run with that.
Mm.
And so you build the site, it's a one-off project, they take it and they go with it. What I find like most often happens for those projects is someone will come back like once a year or a couple times a year and say, hey, Grace, like we're adding this new section, or we want to add pricing to our website, or some sort of like new functionality or section that's outside of the CMS. And that's the type of work that I take on kind of on an as needed basis.
Mm.
I do work with a couple clients on retainer basis, but it's not my favorite structure to work in, but I do it for clients that I really enjoy working with, and that have a need for it. And usually that's for things like they're very quick moving B2B SaaS companies,
Mm.
and they need to be spinning up landing pages and new CMS
Gotcha.
collections and like things like that. So that's like typically what happens. And then within those retainer structures as well, I'm often not necessarily from like an SEO perspective, but I will also do like a monthly audit of the site to make sure that like we don't have any like big performance red flags, or
Mm.
something hasn't happened with indexing, or other things like that. So it's kind of like I'll keep tabs on everything as well as doing those kind of like one-off updates.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. I guess what, because a lot of people love retainers.
Hmm.
I, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about retainers. It really depends on the client. You're absolutely right. For me, like to me, sometimes that relationship can get out of control in
Hmm.
terms of like suddenly they think that like you're at their beck and call and like I don't know. It can just be it can turn into kind of a toxic situation kind of quickly if they take advantage of the situation. And so on one hand, it's stable income. On the other hand, like then you end up in that kind of like repetitive sort of cycle a lot of times, or you're in chaos. And I found that like retainers are kind of one or the other. It's either like kind of really boring or kind of chaotic. So I have like mixed feelings about the whole situation, but I know a lot of people love
Yeah.
to have that, you know, steady predictable income, which totally makes sense. Like, what's your take? Like, what don't you like about retainers?
Yeah, I think retainers can, I think it's also like a personality thing. Like I love the turnover of new projects. Like every 2 or 3 months, I'm working on something completely different.
Sure.
Like what I'm working on right now is like completely 100% turnover from clients that I was working on a few months ago. And to me, that's really exciting because it's that new, fresh interest in my work all the time. And I get to learn about someone else's business and work on fresh design work and all of that. So like, that's why I love project-based work. What I don't love about retainers, it's kind of like a lot of the things that you described is either like a client struggles to send you enough tasks for your time for like it to be worth it on their part for your time. And I
Yeah.
don't want to like be wasting a client's money. Like I want to like fulfill all the hours that we have in that. And so what I've been doing more recently is I haven't set retainers with like a maximum number of hours. I've set them with a minimum
Okay.
so that we have like a 3 hour minimum per month so that I know that like I have to book this amount of time to do baseline kind of stuff. And then if we go beyond that, it's just on like an hourly basis.
Hmm.
So that works quite well. The other thing, like I'm not totally against retainers now. Like I like the turnover of projects a lot. But I think as someone who's starting freelance, retainers can be tricky. And I think they're tricky primarily from a pricing perspective.
Mm.
Because if you are a new freelancer, and I think a lot of new freelancers hear this, they're like retainers are the golden ticket. If you have like a bunch of retainers, you have X amount of income, it's
Right.
going to be steady all year. Um, but it's really, I think sometimes it's really hard to grow if your entire client list is
Yeah.
retainers because you get to a certain point where your schedule is full and it's all full of retainers. And so in order to increase your income or your revenue for your business, you either have to get rid of those clients and find new ones or increase your retainer costs with them monthly. And so you're either having a conversation with the client that can be challenging if you're not
Yeah.
confrontational, and you're having to do that like pretty regularly if you're a new freelancer, because in the first stages of freelancing, you're raising your rates all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenging conversation to be having frequently. I mean, maybe it's not challenging for everyone. It was challenging for me.
It
um,
is.
and so that's, I think, like the primary thing. I think it's less of an issue maybe if you're a more established independent designer or developer, and you kind of like have solid pricing. But in that early stage, I think it's so hard to like experience rapid growth if you have to have that conversation all the time.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just you have no leverage in that situation, and like usually what ends up happening is like people end up raising their prices on like some kind of like I don't know arbitrary like yearly annually or like and they use kind of like a, oh the you know cost of inflation and when in reality it's like the longer you're going, the better you're getting, likely the faster you're getting, and therefore you should be raising your prices. And it's really hard to, yeah, like I totally agree, like gauge that and then also get the breadth of different experiences and different ways of pricing to really like, I don't know, fully understand all of that. Because I feel like a lot of times with pricing, I mean, it's really, I mean, it comes down to as much as the client's willing to pay, but I think it can feel a lot like a shot in the dark, which again is, you know, puts everybody kind of at a disadvantage because we're all just like shooting in the dark, and that's that's kind of insane, in my opinion. Um,
Yeah.
okay, I want to, from your pricing standpoint, so it sounds like you're doing project-based, probably flat rates.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about like how your pricing evolved from when you started and where you're at today?
Yeah. So I think like baseline, the way that I figure out pricing now is very similar to what I did when I started freelancing, and that was based on a like base hourly rate, how long it was going to take me to do the project. That was the price that I did. And so largely like I'm still using that model. My hourly rate, my functional hourly rate has increased. Jessica Hish has a really great course called The Dark Art of Creative Business, and she talks about
Mm,
pricing work in that way of like having a base hourly rate and then figuring out how long it's going to take you. And what I do more so now than I did when I started is that I'll typically add on like 20% on top of that from like an
mm.
hour's perspective, because I don't stop thinking about work. I think about work when I'm running and when I'm cleaning and when I'm home and
Yeah,
like a
same.
literal
I'm
amount of
unwell.
time. um, and so I'm trying to like accommodate for that a little bit more, because like work truly like takes over my entire life. Like I love working, but it's all that I think about. And so I'm trying to like accommodate for that a little bit more. And I think in general, like how pricing has changed from when I started to now is um, just being a little bit more um, like driven on what I want from a client. I think I was very scared in my first year of freelancing of like what a client was going to think of my pricing.
Mm,
And I think
yeah.
just over time and volume, the number of projects that I've done, I have this pile of evidence of successful projects at that budget. And so it's a lot easier now to have the confidence to say like, yes, I know that this is an appropriate budget for this project, based on time and materials and experience and all of that. So I think it makes a lot of difference just having time in the game.
Yeah.
That increases confidence and all of that as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
the first like year or two of freelance, I was increasing my rates with every single project, to figure out kind of like where that ceiling was.
Yeah. And I think that's especially important to point out too, because a lot of people just starting out in freelance aren't just starting out in their
Yeah.
careers. So like you might be new to freelance business, but that doesn't mean that you're like brand new designer or brand new web developer or something like that. Like you might have 10 years, like especially now, so many people are going freelance by choice or not, but like that are, tenured, that have like 10 years under their belt. And so you're no like new kid on the block when it comes to a lot of that expertise. But being new to freelance, like there also is a lot of content out there that does tell people to like price lower and like I just don't think that it's as black and white, I guess, as like you're either new or you're
Yeah.
not. I think it is
Yeah.
gauged on that, like the value that you provide for sure.
Definitely. And I think it's hard too, because a lot of creatives who either have worked in-house or at a studio, they're excellent designers, but they haven't been involved in the business decisions of putting together
Yeah.
proposals or seeing what pricing looks like or negotiation or any of that. And so while you've been doing the work successfully for years, like I was, um, like I had no idea like what that actually looked like to like go to
Totally.
project and like new business meetings. Like I knew what the end result was, but I had no idea how you actually signed that work. And so that was like a lot of trial and error of just figuring out what that looks like. So it's definitely like a total switch from like just doing design work and being a great designer to then finding business and promoting yourself and like just this constant churn of new business meetings, proposals, signing projects, doing the work, like all of it.
Yeah, and I think like, I mean, so when we, launched the software, we published all of our own data on our prices, our scopes, and our services, and like how that whole thing, how everything like broke down basically. And now I think we have like nearly 150 full like scope of work templates with like services broken out and then like pricing recommendations for each of those services based on how like tens of thousands of users are, adjusting their prices. And it's just interesting to hear feedback from people because I think the two biggest things that we hear from people on pricing that or mistakes that they've made they didn't realize they were making was underpricing themselves, but not just on like an hourly rate basis, but like leaving stuff out of the scope of work that they didn't realize like should be in there or could even be in
Mm-hmm.
there. So like a handoff section where you're packaging the files and you're teaching them how to use the site. Like, yeah, like we can charge for that. Like
Yeah.
even upfront, like auditing and like content gathering or doing, client interviews. If you're doing like roundtable interviews, stuff like that, like people leave those services out a ton. So I think like understanding what goes into those like specific projects and scopes of work is such a huge piece of it, and it does put people at a disadvantage in terms of the time it takes for them to get like ramped up in their business because like now I gotta figure out how to do a freaking scope of work like like
Yeah.
it's just impossible to do all of that.
Yeah.
What last Webflow related question, and then I'm going to ask you my last question, which is more general for freelance. But I'm always curious. So Shopify has a Shopify expert network. I don't know if you know about that, but
Yeah.
which I think is super interesting, and I want to integrate over there. But anyway, so there's a Shopify network. I think Squarespace also has an expert network. Webflow, I believe, has an expert network. What's that been like? Like, are you, technically a part of that? And then what kind of support do they provide? Like, what's it like to have the platform want to help you get more people on Webflow? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so I am a part of the Webflow Experts program. They've had the Experts program for a number of years. It's gone through a few different iterations and kind of structures. And so I was accepted into it kind of I think my second year of freelancing. And my primary like reason for wanting to be part of the experts program was mostly to say that I was a Webflow expert. I think that there's a lot of kind of validation and like clout that comes with just saying that like you've been accepted and approved by Webflow, that you have a certain level of knowledge and skill to be able to execute. And so part of it was just like, I want to say that I'm a Webflow expert, give clients that kind of reputation point that I know what I'm doing. And then on the Webflow side of things, they used to have kind of like a more open directory so that someone could contact you or like submit a project and search through all of the different freelancers and studios and everyone who is listed on the experts platform. And they relaunched their experts platform at their annual conference last year and introduced this structure that like matches you with the potential expert. And so it's based on timing and skills and location and budget and all of these different things. And so with that, I've heard from a lot of folks who that's been really good for. But I find that the biggest limiting factor on my side is timing. And I'm typically booking out 2 or 3 months in advance. And so not a lot of folks who are going to the experts program to like type in their project and get matched are planning out 4 to 5 months ahead. So recently it hasn't been the same kind of like volume of leads that comes in through there, but I know that a lot of other people like do get leads from that, and it's been really good for them. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, she's booked and busy, folks. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I know you can hire people through the Shopify network. I'm not sure about the Squarespace one. I'm like dug into it a while ago because I find it interesting, and I think a lot of freelancers are on Squarespace because it's just a really simple, like clean kind of no code, even though like there's a ton of issues with it with SEO and things like that. But I think if you're just looking for something like quick and easy, it's just like a lot of people on there. But I don't think that I think Shopify probably is the best example of like a big platform or ecosystem. Specifically, I think more around their developers, but I do think that complicated platforms always are going to have people who are going to end up being like really specifically experts in that area. And I think that it's interesting to hear that like clients are deprioritizing what is usually kind of a sticking point sometimes, which is like, oh, you don't have in my industry specific expertise, like you don't know about like freight shipping or whatever it is, but like they're actually in this case prioritizing that platform specific skill set over that, which to me makes way more sense because like, I mean, you're going to do the research no matter what the topic is. It's not like even if you knew about it, you wouldn't have to like dig into everything anyway. So I don't know. I think that's super interesting. And I feel like with that being like sort of an embedded marketplace, it's great for Webflow. I mean, because you're basically out there getting more and more people on there, so they love that.
Yeah.
Um,
It definitely,
Visitors
I
from
think,
normal.
helps with folks who are either like new to the platform or like don't know where to start. Like they
Mm,
at least have this experts directory that they can go to and match with someone, and that can be kind of like the start of their relationship if they don't already like know of someone who's doing that type of work and stuff like
yeah.
that.
Okay, so we had a question in the chat that this answered, which was, you know, sourcing leads as an independent. Obviously, there's like the big marketplaces, the Upworks, the Fivers, that kind of stuff. But sneaky backdoor might be these expert networks. So if you do have an expertise like that, or you want to, you know, learn one, there's tons and tons of resources for that as well. That could be a great way to start just generating leads in a more focused way for stuff that might be easier to manage, you know, if you're newer to things in terms of just like predictability. And I don't know, I do think there's a lot of benefit to having focus in that way, because the opposite way, you got a wide funnel, which is amazing, but it can be chaotic pretty quickly
Oh yeah.
on top of everything else.
Yeah, definitely.
um, all right, so my actually last question, which is a lot of folks out there who are dipping into freelance. The market grew 21%, which is crazy from 2019 to 2022, which is absolutely bonkers. 64 million independents, and not to mention an impending or ongoing recession. We're not sure, but the layoffs are here and they're happening. So a lot of people are going freelance, like probably not by choice.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you have for folks who are either looking to take the leap to do freelance or maybe have found themselves here and the only way out is through?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that like there is so much advice out there, and there's so many different like ways that you can find clients and position yourself and all of that. And I think that that's the question that I get most frequently is like, how do I find clients? Um, and this like is my kind of like biggest piece of advice is that visibility as a freelancer should be your number one focus. Carving out visibility for yourself, promoting yourself, making sure that people know that you're available for work, what kind of work you do, and if it's for them. I think a lot of people don't really know where to start when it comes to freelancing, like finding clients. Like maybe they're an excellent designer and they know that they can do the work well and they're a wonderful communicator and all of that. But if nobody knows what you're doing or what you're trying to do, it is going to be so difficult to find work that you align with. And I think a lot of times it can feel like a little bit cringy or embarrassing to like put yourself out there in a way that's like, I'm available for work, like please hire me. And I think that that's like not necessarily the way to approach it, but making yourself visible as a like with your skill set and showcasing yourself as an expert is so important as an independent because no one else is going to do it for you. There's no studio manager, there's no marketing manager, no one is going to talk about what you're doing except for yourself. And the way that I think that I found a lot of success with freelancing is making myself very visible. And it's uncomfortable. But I think it's brought the best clients, the most fulfilling work, all of that. And what that looks like practically is sharing work as I'm working on it. So if I'm designing a sitemap that day and planning out a website, I'm going to be talking about that. So talking about the work you're doing as you're doing it, talking about past work that you've done, challenges that you've had, what went well, types of clients that you want to work with. There's a lot of ways to say I'm available for work without actually saying I'm available for work. And so I think that if you can focus on that and try to find little ways to make yourself more visible, all of those things kind of come together to a point where people will think of you first when they're looking for a particular skill set or a niche or skill or whatever.
Yeah, I love that. And think of it this way, like help clients find you, basically.
Exactly.
Like they're looking for you and they
Yeah.
want to find you. I cannot tell you how many people ask me, like, do you know any freelancers or is there a place on Wethos that we can post a thing to do? And I'm like, not a marketplace, we're not a marketplace. Like, you know, there's tons of resources, but there's a ton of demand too.
Mm-hmm.
People are looking, so help them find you. I love that.
Yeah,
I think that's great advice. And
absolutely.
that brought us to this interview, didn't it? So I guess it's working.
Yes, it did.
Very meta, very meta.
Yeah.
Grace, if people want to follow along, catch you on the Twitter, I assume, but where else can they do that? What's your handle? How can they find you?
Yeah, I'm most active on Twitter at Grace on Grid. I'm also on Instagram. I don't really post here that often, although I was very happy to join you today. But Twitter is usually the best place to follow me. And I've got some fun projects launching soon and more freelance content coming. So if you're interested in that, tune in, I guess.
Follow along, hit her
Follow
on the bird while
along.
it's still standing. We don't know. We don't know. It could be any day
Yeah.
now. It's but hey, there's great content there still, if you can find it. And Grace is definitely one of them. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation. We're gonna be posting a recap so people can check it out on the blog, lessons learned, all the key takeaways, all that jazz. Grace, I cannot thank you enough. I feel like people must have gotten a ton of value out of this. I learned a ton, so thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and we'll be back next month with another episode of The Leap. I think I'll be coming from New York that time. So
Ooh,
we'll see you guys in a
exciting.
month.
Awesome. Thanks
Thanks,
so
everybody.
much, Rachel.
Have a good night.
Bye.
See you later.